What up, Crab Gang? It's Weary here with our first ever tier list. I have a whole bunch of these planned out, but without further ado, let's get it. Today I'm ranking all the core series Pokemon professors from Generation 1 to Generation 8. For obvious reasons, Colosseum and Gale of Darkness are not included here, but for some reason Professor Willow from Pokemon Go is, and so is Fennel from Black and White. I'll find a spot for them as well. Professor Birch, Professor of the Hoenn region, setting of Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Most of the professors from the early generations didn't have very much involvement in the story, giving you a Pokédex and asking you to help complete it and sending you off on your journey along with a starter Pokemon. Professor Birch is no exception. While he's said to be seen as more outgoing and outside of his lab more often, we only really see him once or twice throughout the story. He takes on a slightly enhanced role in Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby, giving us starters from future generations. Now, all that said, he shows personality, has multiple interactions with you throughout the games, and the intro in which you save him and gain your starter Pokemon is unique for its time. B. Next, we have Professor Elm, Professor of Johto, the setting of Silver, Gold, and Crystal. Like Birch, his involvement in the story is minimal. We don't even really see him pick up any larger role in Soul Silver or Heart Gold. I don't really have much to say about Professor Elm because apart from a few phone calls for plot progression, he isn't really present in the main story. You deal with a lot of his assistants, similar to dealing with Professor Oak's assistants in Gen 1. I largely attribute this to technical limitations at the time of this game's release. Professor Elm lacks presence and has a very unoriginal way of giving you your starter Pokemon. However, he is still a professor, and he helps you get started on your Pokemon journey. C. Professor Kakui, the professor of the Alola region, the setting of Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Professor Kakui is one of the best professors Pokemon has ever seen. Not only does he have a strong backstory, he drives the story forward in a thrilling way. He serves as a guide and mentor, as well as an opponent and adversary, being one of the most well-developed characters in Pokemon. No other professor has served as league champion, making Kakui just as unique as Sun and Moon are. He has style and is more than just a background character, which is something that a lot of the other professors fall victim to. S. Next up, Professor Oak. The OG. You all know where he came from. Professor Oak started us on our Pokemon journey over 20 years ago and has managed to stay relevant throughout the life of the series. He is one of, if not the only professor to appear in more than one core series game. He usually makes post-game appearances to give us access to additional content, allowing each game to have its own identity while building a lasting legacy that is felt throughout the franchise. To rank him lower than S would be an insult. Professor Rowan, the professor of the Sinnoh region, Diamond, Pearl, Platinum. Professor Rowan is the last of the professors with minimal story involvement. Short of giving you the Pokédex and your starter Pokemon as all other professors do, the only other part he plays in the story is when the player begins to explore the lakes in the Sinnoh region. He puts a loose frame around the story, having minimal involvement, but still gives us our starter Pokemon and Pokédex in a way more unique than Gen 3. I give him a high B. Next we have Professor Sycamore, Professor of the Kalos region, the setting of X and Y. He takes a larger role in the story than other professors, keeping tabs on the player and their friends throughout the game. He appears sporadically to converse with the player and has even fought in a trainer battle in one instance. He's mentioned in a couple other core series games, making his presence felt throughout more than just his own game. Professor Burnett. She's the wife of Professor Kakui in Sun and Moon, but she has a very minor role compared to many of the other professors in the series. She studies the relationship between Pokemon and other dimensions in her lab in Alola. For her non-traditional role and minor story involvement, she gets a D. Bennell is a friend of Professor Juniper, gives us the Sea Gear and an HM, but she isn't really a professor, though she does study Pokemon. D. Professor Juniper, the professor of the Unova region, the setting of Black and White. She is one of the best professors Pokemon has to offer. Not only does she give us our starter Pokemon and the Pokédex, but she shows us how to catch a Pokemon, something no other professor does. She stays involved in our journey, taking the time to appear physically in some locations and calling us in others. While not as developed as Professor Kakui, she was the first professor to be more involved than just saying, hey, here's a Pokédex, here's a Pokemon, go get him. S. Professor Magnolia is the professor of the Galar region, setting of Sword and Shield. She has minimal involvement in the story, giving us our Dynamax band, but unlike any other professor, she doesn't give us the Pokédex or our starter Pokemon. She eventually cedes her position as a professor to Sonia, but appears rarely throughout the game and is about as involved as some of the early generation professors. C. Now this one may be a hot take. Sonia, or should I say Professor Sonia, takes over as Professor of the Galar region from Professor Magnolia. She has much more story involvement than Professor Magnolia, accompanying the player on most of the game's major events. She helps us discover the legendary Pokemon of the Galar region and even travels with us in one of the expansions to Sword and Shield. However, for the majority of the game, Sonia is not a professor. That said, she does give us the Pokédex, and her transformation from a normal character to a professor is the first we've seen in the series. For her development and her involvement in the story, she gets an A. Professor Willow is the professor of Pokemon Go. I don't really know where to put him because I haven't played Pokemon Go too much. I know he gives us a starter Pokemon, sets us off on our journey, and he checks in from time to time. We can even send him Pokemon. He checks all the boxes of a normal professor, so I don't see why we wouldn't put him anywhere other than B. I hope you enjoyed this tier list, and if you didn't, I really don't care. Thanks for wasting your time. Did you agree with my rankings? Any hot takes? Let me know in the comments. I look forward to making more of these in the future. There are a ton of templates we can use. Till then, stay safe and good luck in your future endeavors.